question becomes, what are you going to do with your awareness? What are you going to do with this time between your birthday and your death day? That's for you to decide. My suggestion is that you use it consciously and wisely, that you use it to align your personality with your soul, that you use it to align your life, your actions, your words with the loving parts of your personality, and that is where the work lies.
Welcome my guest, Gary Zukav. Gary is a renowned American spiritual teacher and a well-respected author of 4 consecutive New York Times bestselling books, including the book, The Seed of the Soul. This book led the way to the alignment of the personality and the soul as a fulfillment of life and captured the imagination of millions. His books have sold more than 6 million copies and are published in 32 different languages. Gary's newest book, called The Universal Human, which is about the new era of human evolution and offers a vision of a world based on love, along with the invitation to begin bringing such a world into being now. He is a graduate at Harvard University with a degree in international relations and a former Green Beret officer of the U.S. Army Special Forces with Vietnam service. Gary Zukav co-founded the Seed of the Soul Institute with Linda Francis and has appeared more than any guest on the Oprah Winfrey Show, a total of 36 times, where his insights, warmth, and contagious enthusiasm has endeared millions of viewers worldwide. As I mentioned, I'm just so utterly honored to have this conversation with you today, and it is such a privilege to have you on Passion Love Pursuit podcast. I can't say enough, so thank you so much for being here. So I have given an introduction to you at the beginning of the podcast before we began this interview, which if people haven't known you or heard your name, they certainly have heard of your #1 selling book, which is Seed of the Soul, which was published back in 1989, as we mentioned. And it is still impacting many, many, many lives. And you are known as the most recognized spiritual teacher for so many years. But I would love to just start off by asking you, how did you begin this path of spiritual development yourself to get into this space?
It was a process, not an event. I think that the best place to start it, it's always difficult to say where something starts. Because seeds are planted sometimes before we're aware that the seeds were planted. I was living in San Francisco, and my life was not aware. I was mostly riding motorcycles, experimenting with drugs. I was addicted to sex with women, and I thought it was an admirable and pretty cool life. I didn't have any idea how much pain I had in my life then. And how shallow my experiences were compared to what they can be, and they are now. And I got invited to a meeting of physicists at the Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory, which is above UC Berkeley, which is just across the bay from San Francisco. And I went to this Friday afternoon meeting, which was just wonderful. It was put on by a physicist at LBL named Elizabeth Rauscher, and she called it the Fundamental Physics Group, and she spelled it FYSICS. And she was just a delight. And some of the most renowned physicists in the world, and certainly in California, were in this meeting. And the question they were discussing that day was, are we creating the reality we're experimenting with? And I had been discussing that with my small group in coffee shops in North Beach. But these were not coffee shop conversations for them. They were world-class physicist. And I got so excited by what I heard that I felt as though I'd had 3 cups of cappuccino and sparks were coming off my fingertips. But I could not explain what excited me so much. And so I started reading. I went to the used bookstores and started reading books on physics. And I asked if I could come back next week, the following Friday, and they said yes. And I did. And after a while of reading, I began to get a sense of what was exciting me so much. And then I decided that I wanted to give a gift of what I was learning, that I wouldn't be involved in physics indefinitely. And I wanted to write a book for liberal arts majors like me that don't have any interest in science and really even less interest in mathematics. And so I asked this group of physicists if they would help me. And they said yes, they would. And they only ask they ask of me the same thing, all of them, get it right. Get it historically, conceptually, and factually correct. And so I started writing, and they started giving me comments, usually more comments than the chapters. They would write more to me than I would give them to comment on. And I started writing this book, and I had a chapter that I created for each, an outline that I created for each chapter. But after only a few minutes, I would realize that there's something else that's more interesting to me to write about. And so I leave the outline behind, in fact, throw it away, and follow the energy. And after 6 months, I had about 6 chapters written, and I noticed that they all fit together. And that was curious to me, because how did that happen since I had thrown away the outlines? And then something remarkable happened for me. I realized that I wasn't alone in writing this book. And not only that, I experienced that it's not possible to be alone. So everything that we call a creation is actually a co-creation. The ancient Greeks called this kind of non-physical assistance the muses, and they listed 9 of them. There's a lot more than 9. And that was my first awareness with consciousness of non-physical reality. I had encountered it earlier in my life when my grandmother, when I was laughing at her funeral at something I thought was funny, and she jerked my hand down and said, shh, like she did when I used to walk with her, and she wanted to talk, or she thought I was saying something unwarranted. But she didn't want me disrupting her at her funeral. She wanted to listen to it. And I knew that was unusual, but I didn't realize what it is actually, or the impact of it. But when I realized that I wasn't creating alone, I was aware of what I was feeling. And I decided to live my life the way this book was being written, which was consciously, spontaneously, intelligently, and joyfully. And I've come a little ways in that direction. But this was the beginning, I think, of what you might say a spiritual path, which means a path that includes more of the world, awareness of more of the world than I had at the time. And I've discovered since then that hundreds of millions of people are acquiring an expanded perception of the world around them and themselves and the universe. And it's part of a large, that's an understatement, an epic, unprecedented transformation to human consciousness. And we're in it now. And within a few generations, everyone will have this expanded perception. Call it multisensory perception. because it's more than the five senses. They form a single system of perception whose object of detection is physical reality. Now we have another system. We're multisensory, and I'm not alone. And so that was the beginning of a wonderful journey to me, and it's still happening. I immediately got a big head when the Dancing Woolly Masters, which was the name of the first book, got a rave review in the New York Times and was a bestseller everywhere. But I didn't think my big head didn't come in the usual way, like thinking I'm special, although it did, that part of my personality. Yeah. But I would say, oh no, it's nothing. It is nothing. But it was a big deal. And it helped to change my life. And the next book that I wrote 10 years later was called The Seat of the Soul. And I had started a book called Physics and Consciousness to be a sequel to the Dancing Woolly Masters. And I discovered that wasn't satisfying to me. It was interesting and it was engaging, and I think it was a great book if I'd finish it. But its origin was all from here upward. And now I began to be interested in other dimensions of experience than my five senses could provide and my intellect could explain. So that's a long answer, but I hope that it's helpful for you and for our listeners.
Absolutely. Well, since you did touch on a little bit that you had, if you want to say, rage, anger, addictions in your younger years. So it sounded like you started to evolve from that. But I'm curious, when you wrote your first book, were you still living in that space of anger, ego, and addictions, or did it start to transform after writing that first book?
I was still living there. I wouldn't call it ego. That's a pretty general term. I would say specifically they were parts of my personality that originate in fear. Those are the parts that everyone can recognize as anger, jealousy, resentment, competition, superiority, entitlement, need to please, inferiority, all of those things. They control me as they control most people, actually. And with our new perception, we have not only an expanded awareness, but a new potential and a new experience and understanding of power as the alignment of the personality with the soul. And that is much different than the understanding of power as the ability to manipulate and control. However, this new power is not something that comes as a gift like multisensory perception. It's a potential of the new consciousness, and you have to create it. And as I discovered that, I began to discover how. And my life has been dedicated to contributing all that I can to this transformation of human consciousness, not because I'm causing it. No one's causing it. It's happening. It's our new human consciousness. And creating authentic power is our new evolutionary requirement. But anyway, I'll stop answering and see if you have any other questions for me.
Absolutely. So most importantly, I want people to gain clarity on the difference of our soul and our personality and why we must align that to create this authentic power to move into this new consciousness and have that potential authentic power. So what do you define as the soul and, of course, the personality?
The soul, your soul, is that part of you that is your essence, you might say. It is at the heart of who you are. Five sensory individuals are not aware of soul except as a theological or philosophical entity, but it's real. And as you become multisensory, you begin to experience that. So from what I told you about my experience at the Lawrence Berkeley Laboratory in writing this book, I'd like to suggest to all of our listeners that the message in that is that your life is worth paying attention to. And if you have experiences that you haven't had before, there's a reason for that. It means that this new consciousness is emerging in you. And it's inviting you to new potential. For example, a multisensory perception would be the thought or the hunch that you're more than a body and a mind. That's a multisensory perception. If you have the thought or the hunch that the world isn't just random or accidental, but there's meaning in it, that's a multisensory perception. And if you have the thought or the hunch that the universe isn't cold and dead and merciless, but that it's somehow wise and compassionate and alive, that's a multisensory perception. And there are countless multisensory perceptions that are now touching hundreds of millions of us. And I'd like to suggest that they're worth paying attention to, which means your life is worth paying attention to. And also, Erica, I want to also say to all of our listeners, I don't suggest that you, or even expect you to take as so anything that I say simply because I say it. In fact, I would suggest that you not take anything as so that anyone says simply because they say it, even if they've been on television or they have a podcast or they've written a book or they have a pulpit. Experiment with it. If you resonate with anything that you hear, and see how it works in your life as you apply it. And if it produces something that's constructive and healthy, then experiment some more. And if it doesn't, let it go. Don't try to wear a shoe that doesn't fit.
Absolutely. And that's that tug that you were getting, that you were being guided a different direction. So it's listening to that intuitive hit, if you want to call it the intuition, and being guided by your soul. So once you're, I think when you explain, for what I've heard, when you're in alignment with your personality and soul, it's like following, I love this analogy that I've heard you speak about. Our soul is the mothership, like fleet, if you want to say. And then there's the boats that follow it. And our soul is always headed in the right direction, and it doesn't have control of the fleets behind it. But if you are in alignment and following the mothership, then you are in that alignment with your soul. It's a beautiful analogy. I'm probably chopping it up, but I love how you speak about that, because the importance of knowing if you are out of alignment with your soul is really that awareness. I believe awareness is the seat of beginning to get in touch with your soul and being able to stay in alignment. So, in speaking about awareness.
Well, can I mention something here,
Yes,
Erica?
please.
It's everyone has non-physical teachers. Everyone has non-physical guides, or at least a teacher. And this is so whether you're aware of it or not. 5 sensory individuals. And that's what we were since the origin of our species until a generation ago, have non-physical teachers. But their awareness didn't allow them to interact as consciously as we now have the ability to do. So it wasn't as though I became multisensory and aligned my personality with my soul, which I'm still working on doing, by the way. It was my first impulse when I heard about this group that was meeting at LBL to go there if I could. I went because I wanted to see what physicists look like. I simply didn't have a grasp of what, I didn't know anything about physicists, but I had this sort of attraction to going there, and I followed it. Well, you can do that too. As you create authentic power, you begin to notice which of your impulses come from fear and which come from love. so that you can distinguish between them and act on those that come from love and not act on those that come from fear. But our intuition is always with us, and you can listen for it. So I had this impulse to go to this meeting, and the meeting dazzled me. And it caused me to want, then I had the desire to understand what it is that was exciting me so much, and I followed it. Then I had the desire to learn more about it, so I asked if I could return, and I did, because they said yes. Then I had the desire to write a book, and I did. So your life is like that too. If you're sitting around waiting for your life to suddenly get rich and full and meaningful, well, be patient. It could take a while.
True.
But as you become proactive in your life and start to act on your life as though it's meaningful, because it is, then you can begin to experiment with it, and your life begins to transform from an experience into an experiment. And you are the experimenter.
Beautiful. And actually, speaking on that you're mentioning, you mentioned that intention is at the forefront of creating authentic power. And so how does intention play in our lives, and why is it so critical that we are intentional in pretty much every area of our life?
Intention is primary. Intention is central to everything that you do. Everything that you do and say has an intention. You may not be aware of it, but it has one. If you're not aware of it, then it's unconscious. That means you're speaking or acting unconsciously. If you're not aware of your intention, it comes from fear. You don't just accidentally intend something from love, but we intend things from fear all the time. And every time we do, and we act on it, we create consequences that are difficult, that are painful. And every time you consciously act from an intention of love, you do the opposite. You create consequences that are healthy and wholesome and fulfilling and pleasing to experience. Now, an intention is a quality of consciousness. And that quality of consciousness, as you hold it, consciously or unconsciously, infuses your words or your deeds. For example, suppose you're hiking and you see two people walking on a trail not too far from you, and suddenly one of them pushes the other, and the other falls off the trail and rolls down an embankment. And you think, wow, that must have been quite an argument. Or what did the fellow who got pushed say to deserve that? And then you run into them later, and they're telling you that the one that did the pushing saw a rattlesnake on the trail and pushed his friend out of the way of the rattlesnake. So here is an action, a push. But what was the intention behind it? If it was fear, like an argument, a disagreement, a judgment, that creates certain consequences. If it was love, like care for your friend, that creates others. And you can see this everywhere. Some people give, for example, donations to charity, or they do things that they feel are benefiting others.
Yeah.
Are they doing that from love or from fear? Well, if you're if you're donating your time to a good cause, but you're doing it because you want to improve your self-image, or you want to have a persona as a kind person or a giving person, that's fear. You're really doing it for yourself. But if you're doing it because you really want to help out, no second agendas, that's doing it from love. So becoming aware of your intention is so important. And in order to become aware of your intentions, you need to become aware of your emotions. Now, emotions are not very important to five-sensory humans. In fact, they're a nuisance, like appendix. They get in the way of pursuing external power, which means manipulating and controlling. But they're very important to multisensory humans because your emotions tell you when fear is active in you or when love is active in you. And if you act from an intention of fear, you'll create painful consequences. And if you act with an intention of love, you'll create constructive consequences. In other words, you have a choice now about how you're going to shape your life. This is the beginning of mastery. Until then, you're reacting continually to the world, and you think that it's the world that's causing your pain or your joy. As you use your multisensory perception, you begin to be aware that it's not the world that is causing your pain or your joy. It's the world that is activating internal dynamics in you. And those internal dynamics are creating pain or pleasure. So if you spend your time trying to change the world whenever you're feeling emotional pain, you're spinning your wheels. You're squandering your energy. You're not looking in the right place. You're looking outside. That's what five-sensory humans do. They try to change the world to make themselves feel better, or at least out of some pain. But multisensory humans do the opposite. They look inside at where that pain is coming from. What is the source of it? And they challenge that or cultivate it.
I think everybody needs to hear that. That's so critical, that the only way, and you state this, that the only way to change the world is by changing ourselves, not by doing something, not looking at the external, by looking at the internal. It's so critical.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So speaking about authentic power, what are some specific tools to create that authentic power and move into this new consciousness with this multisensory perception?
You're already in the new consciousness if you're interested in this podcast. Question is now, how can you create the potential of authentic power? And this is important to do because in this new territory that we've entered, everything has changed. And the pursuit of external power, which means the ability to manipulate and to control, now produces only violence and destruction. It used to be our good medicine. It used to be what enabled us to survive. Now it's toxic. It's poisonous. And in order to move in the direction that your soul wants to move, in order to move toward meaning and purpose and fulfillment, you need to align your personality with your soul, whose intentions are harmony and cooperation and sharing and reverence for life. And the only way to do that, which means, by the way, in short, moving toward love. And the only way you can do that is to find those and experience those parts of your personality that don't do that and don't want to do that, and move beyond the control of them. That is the creation of authentic power. For example, when you feel angry, and that part of your personality wants to lash out in some way at others, with words or withdraw, or in some way manipulate people because it's angry. And in that moment, you choose not to act on your anger, but instead to turn your attention inward and put it on the physical sensations you are experiencing in certain areas of your body. For example, your throat area, your chest area, and your solar plexus area. There's more than that, but these three are usually, for me anyway, the easiest to detect physical sensations in. And when you put your attention on any of these areas and you detect painful physical sensations, you know that fear is present. And when I say painful physical sensations, I mean it literally. Not feeling happy, depressed, up, down. I'm talking about sensations. For example, if you're in a frightened part of your personality, that ache or throb or sting or stab or burn or churn. Because fear is physically painful. It's like accidentally hitting your thumb with a hammer or getting your fingers caught in a car door. It hurts. Heartache is not poetic. If you have the courage to turn inside, to put your attention in these areas when you're missing someone or feeling grief of loss, or that you can't live without somebody or something, you'll find a lot of pain. And as you're feeling that pain, you choose not to act on it. Then you're in the process of creating authentic power. And as you do that again and again and again, you begin to move beyond the control of that part. The painful physical sensations still come. Its judgmental, comparative thoughts still come. But they don't penetrate you as deeply as they did before. They begin to roll off like water from the feathers of a duck. And eventually, they come, but they don't control you. You still feel them, but they don't control you. Now you're gaining some real authentic power. And this enables you to become and to act as the authority in your own life.
I know I have personally experienced this, and I feel I live more in this space now. I'm very conscious of my emotions, and I choose my reactions. I at least slow down. It's not, as you said, you're still in the process of aligning your soul and your personality as I am, as I'm sure many people are listening, but that emotional awareness is when you get to make a better choice, and then a better choice the next day and the next day. So it is a continued practice, but I do feel, especially, I know you've been talking about this new consciousness actually for many years now, but I do recognize, at least I feel, I'm not sure if you agree with this. A lot of people are saying right now that they feel awake, that they're awakening. Do you feel that is the sense of this new consciousness, that a lot of people are now in this multisensory perception, that that's the space they're living in, and that's why they're calling it somewhat awake?
Awake is a relative term, but the answer to your question is yes. There are hundreds of millions of people that are beginning to be aware of things that they weren't aware of before. So relative to their five sensory perception, their multisensory perception allows them to be awake in this new sense. Are they aware also of what is happening inside of them? That's part of awakening. Are they using what they're aware of inside of them? Do they have commitment to their spiritual growth? Becoming multisensory doesn't make you more patient or more kind or more contributory. It makes you more aware. Then the question becomes, what are you going to do with your awareness? What are you going to do with this time between your birthday and your death day? That's for you to decide. My suggestion is that you use it consciously and wisely, that you use it to align your personality with your soul, that you use it to align your life, your actions, your words, with the loving parts of your personality, and that is where the work lies. My friend Ram Dass, who passed away a little while ago, once said, "I intend my life to be a statement of love and compassion, and where it's not, there lies my work." I feel the same as he.
Absolutely.
Now, yes, and you mentioned earlier making a better choice. From the point of view of the universe, I suggest the orientation is not better and worse or good and bad, but more cause and effect.
Oh, yes.
When you choose an intention and act on it, you cause consequences. That's a cause. And if you participate in the cause, you participate in the consequence. So when you choose the cause consciously, you choose its consequence consciously. Someone who can do that is much more awake than someone like I was in San Francisco when I was addicted to sex, riding motorcycles, experimenting with drugs, and marveling at the monthly miracle of the rent. Was I aware? No, hardly. Was I conscious of what I was doing? Yes. But I didn't realize that I was creating painful consequences. I was so frightened of not living up to my expectations, not living up to others' expectations, not succeeding, not pleasing, not all of those things. And I was so frightened of that, without the knowledge of any of that fear, that if somebody had said to me, Gary, you're doing everything you're doing because you're frightened, everything that led me into the Army and led me to become an officer in the Special Forces, I would have said, oh no, that would have caused a fight. I couldn't tolerate that. So when someone is so frightened that they don't know they're frightened, that's common among many people. The street name for that is macho. But that's what I was. So when you talk about making a better choice, obviously the choices that I make that help me become more connected and loving and appreciative and able to celebrate life and contribute to it are better choices from my perception. I feel better. My life is very meaningful to me. Do I still get in power struggles with my spiritual partners, like my life partner, Linda? Yes. Frightened parts of my personality do. And I've discovered that it takes more courage to stop a power struggle in me than anything the Army ever asked me to do that I thought required courage.
Actually, you spoke about this in your book, Universal Human, that being in the special forces as a Green Beret, you thought it was courageous then, but the type of courage you are living in now is, like you said, a whole nother level of an example of what courage is.
It's the same courage, Erica. I knew I had courage then, and I have a lot of courage now. But now I use it in a different way. Before I used it to impress people and prove to myself that I'm admirable or lovable. Oh, I wouldn't have used that term in the Army. It wasn't in my consciousness. So I did things like became a paratrooper. I would go on night jumps with equipment. I went on combat patrols in Laos. But I was frightened. And I was using my courage in the old way. Now I use my courage a lot, but it's in the new way. It's when someone offends a frightened part of my personality, or someone I feel has betrayed me, or isn't living in integrity, or any of the countless ways that the fear-based parts of my personality become activated. I now use my courage to not act on that impulse, but instead to turn my attention inward, to feel what I'm feeling in terms of physical sensations and where I'm feeling them. And then, if they're painful, not act on them, not show my displeasure, not put somebody in their place, not tell somebody how wrong or bigoted or ignorant they are. All of my frightened parts have their own ways of showing fear, as do yours and as does everyone who's listening to us. The question is, will they control you? They probably are controlling you now. How long do you want to continue that? That's up to you. We talked about better choices. That's where I started this part, this thought. You might say that when you make a choice, it's like going through a doorway. Before you make the choice, there's lots of doorways. Each one of them is a possible choice. When you make a choice and you go through a doorway, all the other doors close. Mm. And what you see when you go through the door are more doorways. The optimal choice is always your own spiritual development, is always your own striving to become an individual who can love without reservation and receive love without reservation. But that doesn't make it a better choice from the point of view of the universe. It makes it a different choice, and your choices determine your experiences.
Absolutely.
So you can go through an entire lifetime of anger and sexual addiction or judgment or shaking your fist at the universe or at other people and die that way. And you're not judged by the universe. And you're not rewarded if you do something else. Everything in the Earth School serves your spiritual development.
Absolutely.
Even those things that you don't like. Hold on to that thought, and that will help you begin to see the wisdom and the compassion that is always around you. In other words, everything that happens to you serves the purpose of bringing the consciousness of your soul into the awareness of your personality. And many of those experiences are not experiences that the personality would choose, such as cancer, such as the death of a child, the failure of a business, a divorce. But they all have the same purpose, to bring your attention to that within you, not in the world, but within you, that you must challenge and change in order to give the gifts that you were born to give.
I want everybody to let that sit in, because I think that is so critical. I've always believed that life is a series of lessons, and all those lessons are just to guide you back to your soul. And if we ignore them based on fear, we will continue to get another lesson and another lesson until, again, we are guided back to our soul. And that's where the pain comes in, the frustration.
The pain comes in finding those parts of your personality that are preventing you from aligning yourself, your personality, with your soul. That's where emotional awareness is helpful. Mm-hmm. That's the purpose of pain in the Earth School. You know, I really appreciate the questions that you're asking.
No, thank you.
And I appreciate it because multisensory perception is emerging not only in neonates, and all of us know there's some very remarkable babies being born now, hundreds of millions of them, but it's also emerging in individuals who were previously five sensory, such as I. When it comes to millennials, it's a bit of a mixed bag, because some millennials were born, if they were born early enough, five sensory. And so multisensory perception is emerging within them. And some of them were born multisensory. The things that we're saying seem obvious to them, or at least the expanded perception seems obvious. But I'm especially grateful for your questions, because I suspect that many of your listeners are millennials. And I want to say that I am so impressed and awed by the quality that I see in so many millennials, and in the way they look at their lives, the way they look at the work they're doing or not doing, the way they look at the pandemic, always looking to find a better everything, a new normal that is not self-centered in the pursuit of external power, manipulation and control, new interaction, new relationships, which are spiritual partnerships between equals for the purpose of spiritual growth. They no longer look at one another as 5th century humans did at their potential partners, life partners, as people to fill them in. A woman looking to a man to provide her with protection and what she needs, and a man looking at a woman to provide him with tenderness and intuition and care. Because the new male, the new female are very different. The new female can do anything she wants. She's not confined to the limitations that society places on females. She can be the head of a state. She can be the captain of an aircraft. She can be the head of a corporation. She can be a plumber, a carpenter, an architect, a mother, a nanny, anything she wants. She's unstoppable. And a new male is tender, caring, cares for the young, cares for the elderly, laughs and cries easily. You can see these new males. They're everywhere. I see them in the airport. They're walking through the airport, patting the behind of a baby they're burping. They're pushing carts down grocery store aisles as they're shopping. They're driving children to play dates. The new male and the new female, as they look for life partners, are looking for someone to share the difficult and challenging journey of spiritual development with. And they're looking at their jobs, especially now after the pandemic, and they're thinking, do I want to go back to this? It's more than do I want to go back to an office. It's do I want to go back to this? Yeah. What does this company stand for that I've been working for? And is it worth it to go back? For some people who are making a very comfortable living, that's a real question. But they're looking at these questions and striving to contribute what they can. Now, of course, millennial is a big category. It's as big as baby boomer. And there are all kinds. There are each individual's personalities with frightened and loving parts of themselves. And each of those personalities is the incarnation of a soul, or an aspect of a soul, into the earth school for the purpose of growing spiritually in this domain of time and space and matter and duality. But millennials now, those that have multisensory perception, are bringing this shared understanding. And by the way, this understanding is shared with baby boomers like me, with children who are in Gen Z, and even all young people who can express themselves linguistically, with language. In other words, that relationship that millennials feel is the relationship of personalities who are beginning to see one another as souls, soul-to-soul connections. That's what they're looking for. That's what everyone who is multisensory or becoming multisensory is now wanting to create. is hungering for. They don't have to think these words, I'm going to get a spiritual partner, I'm going to do this and this. They just want meaning.
They're driven to that, yes.
And millennials are expressing this sort of in a group consciousness, in a shared collective consciousness. So I want to say everything that I'm saying applies to everyone who's in human form, not just to you as millennials. But I think that you're in a remarkable group, and I want to support you in every way that I can. And I'm looking forward very much to what you're going to create for my granddaughters, who are also millennials.
Aw, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Well, I think as you spoke about there's only two things, a choice, either love or fear. And I'm just curious, some people think that the opposite of love is hate, but why is the opposite actually fear? Can you kind of explain that and why everything is choosing one or the other?
Everything in the Earth School is a duality: good, bad, male, female, night, day, up, down. And the opposite of love is not hate. It is fear. Hate is an expression of fear. It's a judgment. It's an emotional charge. It's a perception of another as an object, a thing, a despicable thing, or a personally despicable thing. And that's not love. Everything that's not love is fear. Everything that's not fear is love. So as you challenge a frightened part of your personality, you cultivate a loving part. For example, as I challenge the frightened part of my personality that is impatient, I'm cultivating the part that is patient. And you're doing the same. And if you're not aware, if you're not conscious of your intentions, of your emotions, of the choices that you're making, you ask how to create authentic power. There's two tools: emotional awareness and responsible choice, which is a choice that creates consequences for which you're willing to assume responsibility. And you have the ability to consult intuition as well. That's a tool. So that's what our opportunities are. And we have free will, moment by moment, by moment by moment, which means choice by choice by choice. And we can use that free will only when we're conscious of the choices that we're making. And those choices are love and fear. You can say, my intention is to get a new job. Of course. That's actually an out tension. But when you say, why do I want to get a new job? You say, well, to make more money. Of course. Why do you want more money? And then you can begin to go downward and downward until you get to the bedrock bottom, can't get any deeper intention. It's love or it's fear. It's to contribute, to give. It's to have the fulfillment of connection, or it's to take care of yourself first. And really others not at all.
I think that's important. What you mentioned is kind of getting to the root cause of why you are doing something. What's your intention? Like peeling the onion. I think it's a good exercise that people should do if they notice a certain behavior that they're acting on so often that's caused by their personality. Understanding, developing awareness of that action, and then also just peeling the onion and trying to discover what is causing this, getting to the root cause of it.
Yes.
So important for us to evolve.
I agree. So peeling the onion is an appropriate metaphor in the sense that as you develop your awareness, your spiritual development, there's always more meaning to be found. You can read a book like The Seed of the Soul or Universal Human and go back and read it again later, and you find that it's meaningful to you, maybe even more meaningful. The words haven't changed, but you've changed. And so you're understanding what you're reading and what you're seeing differently. Same thing with your life. Same things are still happening in your life, but you're seeing them with more meaning, with more depth. So In that sense, peeling the onion is a metaphor, but it doesn't illuminate the power and the depth and the potential of developing spiritually, of becoming authentically powerful. It's more than peeling things away. Here's one way in which it's similar. You might say that the love is always there in you. You might even say you are love if you go deep enough. And deep, not physically deep, but what you are, what everything is. And so becoming aware of that and living that requires removing everything that prevents you. I heard that Michelangelo was once asked when someone about a magnificent sculpture he created called the David and Goliath. It's a 17-foot high statue that is awesome because it looks so soft. The skin is so smooth. It's so real. Everything about David is so sensual and real. And when Michelangelo was asked, how did you do that? And he said he saw the David in the block of marble, and he removed the marble that encased it. That's what you do when you challenge frightened parts of your personality. You're chipping away the marble that is encasing the pure beauty inside it. What you're chipping away are your fear, the control of your fear over you. That's, in addition, you're also cultivating love. It's not just saying, taking off the wrapping and saying, what's there? It's cultivating love. It's not just challenging fear. So creating
sorry, go ahead.
Creating authentic power, you might say, is a heartfulness meditation, and it's intentional. It's not like mindfulness meditation, although that's wonderful and very helpful. But in mindfulness meditation, the goal is to recognize currents of energy, your internal dynamics and your external experiences, and let them flow. Not be attached to any of them. Heartfulness meditation does that and more. It is the process of choosing the energy of love to cultivate with, to act with consciously, and without attachment to the outcome, and eliminating intentions of fear entirely. So you can see just peeling the onion doesn't...
Oh, absolutely not.
Yes, doesn't grasp all of that. You are on a deeper, more powerful, more meaningful journey than any metaphor can bring to you. But there are so many metaphors that are helpful. I love analogies and allegories and metaphors. But there's the experience of them, the experience of yourself as you have the courage and the commitment to grow spiritually will bring you to a place where you feel more meaning, more joy, more creativity, more vitality. And then if you want to explain that to someone else, you'll find yourself using metaphors and analogies.
Right. I've heard a lot of your metaphors that you've shared before, analogies, and they're beautiful because it simplifies something that seems complex, even though it's really not. So it's a way to guide people in really understanding all the greatness that you share. So if we could talk about, since your newest book is Universal Human that came out this year, what do you define as a universal human?
A universal human is an authentically powerful human. A human who is beyond culture, religion, nation, ethnic group, and gender. A human whose allegiance is to life with a capital L first and all else second. For example, if I were a universal human, which I'm not, there aren't any now, I would say, I am a universal human first and a male second. I am a universal human first and an American second. I am a universal human first and white second. I am a universal human first and a grandfather second. I am a universal human first and everything else second. My allegiance is to life. That's what I can tell you about the universal human. Universal humans emerge from multi-sensory, from authentically powerful humans. So creating authentic power is not a shortcut to the universal human. It's a requirement. There are emerging universal humans everywhere. And the book is dedicated to them. And in fact, I'm going to begin a podcast in 2022 called Universal Human.
Amazing.
And its purpose is to discuss the aspects of a universal human that I've just listed with individuals who are experiencing that in themselves. Not the consciousness of a universal human, which is beyond what we can experience, just as what we as multisensory humans is beyond what a five-sensory human could experience. But, for example, one person that I was talking to about this is black, and he does not seem to be, he seems to be beyond his ethnic group. I want to talk to him about that. That means, it means you ignore that you're black. There's a rich, deep cultural heritage, lineage in that. It probably originates in Africa, just as my lineage originates in Northern Europe. So it doesn't mean that you're not aware of your culture. It means that you're not imprisoned by it. It means that you don't need it for your identity. It means you treasure it, but you treasure everyone else's also. And as you become multisensory, you become aware that you are one of many personalities of your soul. Some of those personalities are of different ethnic groups than the one you're in now. So what really is your lineage? From a larger perspective, that's not so important as the soul-to-soul connections, which every multisensory human moves toward. I want to talk with individuals who are, for example, trans individuals, or gay, or lesbian, or bisexual individuals who feel that they are beyond their sexuality. Because as you begin to see gender from a multisensory perspective, it's just a personality aspect, like your skin color. Five-sensory humans think that there's a divide between male and female that can never be crossed because females can have children and males can't. But that difference is a personality aspect. When your soul incarnated, it incarnated into a personality that served best the objectives of your soul as it incarnated. That means its karmic obligations and the potential that it strives to attain. So I want to talk to people because gender now doesn't mean, in other words, gender does not enter into spiritual partnerships. It doesn't have to do with your genitals, with who you are drawn to, or how you look at yourself. You see, from a broader perspective, you're beyond gender. And so I'm looking for individuals who are experiencing that, and many of them are. Yeah. Doesn't mean that everyone who's trans is. They can be trapped in gender that they have now adapted and adopted. I'm talking about something beyond that. A universal human is beyond religion. I have met some individuals in my life who are committed entirely to living their religions. They are Catholic, they are Buddhist, they are Hindu, because that is who they are. But they wear that like a cloak, a beautiful piece of clothing. But they don't ask me to wear it, much less demand that I wear it. And if I'm interested, they love showing me their cloak. Do you see how it's sewn? Look at that color. Isn't it beautiful? But they don't say, you should have one. They just love what they have and they share it. They're beyond their religion. So I'm intending to use the Universal Human podcast to explore aspects of emerging universal humans with one objective: to suggest to everyone who listens to this podcast of conversations among emerging universal humans that you may be one also. So look inside yourself to see parts of you that may be beyond nation, beyond culture, beyond religion, beyond ethnic group, beyond gender. If you find any of that in you, you are already an emerging universal human. If you find the thirst, the hunger for harmony and cooperation and sharing and reverence for life, you are already moving in the direction of creating an authentically powerful life. And if you have the courage and the commitment and the compassion and are developing the conscious communication and actions to become authentically powerful, you are an emerging universal human. And by the way, these things that I'm referring to are parts of the Authentic Power Guideline, and you can download them from seatofthesoul.com. That's S-E-A-T, like what you sit on, of the soul. And that there's some other free things there too that I hope will be beneficial to you. And that's why we created that. And we're doing a lot right now. We means Linda and I and all the team of volunteers that are helping us to create an ecosystem that will support people in creating authentic power and spiritual partnerships now and after we leave the earth school. People here and around the world, which the pandemic has helped enormously because it's made us aware of this largest opportunity for collective empathy that we've had in our species. It has mandated a pause in our mindless activities and given us time to consider them, even if we didn't intend to consider them or want to consider them.
Yep.
It's given us opportunities to see how valuable other people are to us, not as sexual partners, drinking partners, people to help us make money, people to help us feel better, but for who they are. Souls like us, incarnate consciously into the earth school to grow spiritually, which means create authentic power, which means become loving. And it means more than that, it means becoming love.
Oh, so beautiful. Oh my goodness. And I know you talk about in Universal Human some chapters of the pandemic and the message in it. And it's quite interesting. It's great. And I think, as you mentioned, it created that pause, even if we wanted it or not. And it gave us the opportunity to look at things with a different lens, because we were able to silence the noise that's always around us. It's so beautiful. You share so much. I could go into so much more, but I want to honor your time. Is there anything else you want to mention about creating authentic power and moving into this new consciousness?
Be gentle with yourself and do your best. Nothing more is ever asked of you. Guilt, remorse, shame, regret, those have no value other than showing you the consequences of creating in fear if you choose to act on them. Open yourself to your highest potential. In other words, keep in mind your high water marks and don't always think about your low water marks. If I did that, I'd never be able to discuss any of the things that I'm sharing now. I would say, you're a hypocrite. You get into power struggles with Linda. How can you talk about these beautiful things? But I share them from my high water mark, the things I know about me that are worth sharing. And I suggest you look at yourself that way too. And I suggest that you open yourself to partnerships, spiritual partnerships, as replacements for other relationships that as five sensory individuals you've come to recognize: friendship, marriage, business partnerships, academic partnerships. And let them all be partnerships between equals for the purpose of spiritual growth. If you can do that, then you can be anything. You can be an academic, a mother. Then you can be an activist, a spiritual activist, as well as an environmental activist, a political activist, a social activist. You are living in the most exciting, remarkable time that any human has ever lived in or will live in again. We're in the overlap of an old consciousness or a new consciousness. And you choose one or the other with each of your choices. Become aware of which consciousness you're choosing. And every time you act from fear, you act unconsciously. Well, now we're doubling back on some things that we've talked about.
Yeah, but
I'm grateful for these conversations, Erica.
Thank you so much, Gary. So I always ask my guests one question, but I think you somewhat answered it. But if you were to answer this question, if you were to leave a piece of advice, anything, it could not relate to your books or anything, is there anything you would feel somebody needs to hear right now? And it could pertain to anything, a life lesson or anything you would like to partake on to us.
There isn't a difference between me, my books, who I am, what I live, what I value, and what I share. They're all one fabric, my life. Well, I would say consider this. Trust the universe. Trust, relax, do your best, enjoy yourself.
Love that. That's perfect. Thank you so much, Gary. This has been such an honor. I'm overwhelmed by your presence and this privilege, and just to share your message with so many more. I think everybody needs to hear this. They need to read Seed of the Soul, Universal Human, and go look at your website, Seed of the Soul, and download any free resource, because there's so much goodness in this. So I just thank you for this valuable time you've spent with us today, and all your wisdom that you're sharing your heart, your soul with us. And I know it's impacting millions and millions of lives. So I deeply appreciate you.
Oh, you're very welcome, Erica.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Such an honor.